Good morning all and welcome to the first of my history walks for, I was going to say the autumn, but it's still the middle of August and temperatures today are supposed to be getting up to 34 degrees, so it seems a bit silly to be doing a walk, but I'm out early, so I'm going to try and get it done before it gets too hot. And we're doing Crowland. Crowland's been on my list of walks to do for about 3 years now, and it's also been on my sort of too daunting to take on type walks. There's a lot of history and not a lot of research data out there for me to tell you what is what, but I'm going to just do the walk and make it at least visually interesting, even if I can't tell you what everything is. So that's the plan, to head into Crowland, and we're right on the edge of the lands that you could refer to as Crowland at the moment. We're a place that used to be called Brother House or Brother House Bar. I say used to be, if you look at a map in the 1960s, as recently as that, it was a settlement. There were houses, blacksmiths, toll house, pub, 2 pubs. There's nothing here now. It's like it's been deleted. I think there's one new house across the road from me now, but that's it. All the old stuff's gone, and that seems strange. But there's a reason for starting here, which I shall show you in a moment. But that's where we are. We're going to do Crowland, and we're starting at Brother House Bar. Kind of hard to believe, but over here, down there in that sort of brown straw-like ground, derelict ground, used to be a pub, the Boat Inn, and as I say, it was still here in the 60s, so it hasn't been gone for too long. And next to it, somewhere down here, used to be the toll keeper's cottage, so we obviously used to take tolls probably from the crossroads up ahead. So as I say, it blows my mind a bit that it's just kind of not here anymore. I'm used to medieval villages vanishing, but not something that was here in the 1960s, or at least the mid-1900s. Across the road there you can see a house. It is the house, as far as I'm aware, the only house that's still standing, and it's fairly recent. But there used to be a whole row of buildings down there, including a blacksmith, more or less, in those bushes behind the 50 miles an hour sign. But I'm here to see this stone. This stone dates back to, depending which version of historical documentation you want to go with, but it seems to date back to 1200, so about 800 years ago. Some people say it's older than that. The significance to Crowland, you actually just can't read it. It says somewhere across here, Guthlac. You're going to have to trust me because I've seen an imprint of this on the internet, but it does actually say Guthlac. And Guthlac is a very important person when you're talking about the history of Crowland. I like to sort of start these walks with, well, where did this town come from? Everybody says Crowland came from the Abbey. It did. Without the Abbey there'd be no Crowland, so the birthplace of Crowland is very much Crowland Abbey, or Crowland Abbey, to give it its correct name. But the Abbey itself originated from the life of a very ordinary guy called Guthlac, was to become Saint Guthlac. And it was the presence of Guthlac as a religious, wise man that gave birth to the very first version of the Abbey, because he happened to give guidance to a guy that was going to go on to be king. Ethelblad, Anglo-Saxon prince, wanted to be king. Guthlac told him he would be king, and then Ethelblad said the sort of thing I would say, which is, well, if I become king, I'll come back and build you an abbey. Slightly sarcastically probably, but he became king, and he did come back, and although Guthlac had passed away by then, he was good to his word. He came back and he built the first abbey, and we're talking about 700s here, 700s AD in the Anglo-Saxon era, but he started the process of building abbeys on the island of Crowland, because Crowland was an isle back there. So we'll go into some of this in more detail further on the walk, but I don't want this to be just purely about the Abbey, but I wanted to go back as far as I can. Guthlac is where it all started, and this is known as St Guthlac's Cross, and it's a boundary stone. Its purpose was simply to say this is the edge of the lands owned by the Abbey. So I guess I'm on the Spalding side of that now, I would guess, and on the other side of the stone you were back in those medieval times on the lands owned by Crowland Abbey. So this is one of a number of boundary stones, but this one is called St Guthlac's Cross. Was it ever a cross, or was it just a sort of monolith stone? I don't know. It's called St Guthlac's Cross, so one would assume that on the top there was a cross, and this is just the stem of the cross, but I don't know that. Right, we're not in the town centre yet, we're on Postland Road, as you've just seen. A couple of places I wanted to look at on Postland Road, mainly originating from an old postcard I had that I've always loved, and I've always wanted to come to the site where that postcard image was captured, and I think I know where it is. And there's also another building down here that I'd like to have a look at, so get the old legs working and have a wander down Postland Road. While I'm wandering along Postland Road, I ought to mention, because I know someone else will if I don't, Crowland. It's been called Crowland going back to near Anglo-Saxon times, so it's also been Crowland since at least that time. I think it was called something slightly different in a Domesday book. It survives today as Crowland with a Y. When you're talking about the Abbey hangs on to that word. They see that as the proper name for the town. Others use Crowland. I find the town is called Crowland, the Abbey is called Crowland, and I will call it Crowland because that's what I know it as. I should also make mention, even though I have briefly mentioned it already, Crowland used to be an island, as Thorney did, as Ely did, in the fens. You only got here via boat until they drained the fens, so yeah, it used to be an island, which is hard to imagine, but you have to get your head around what these lands looked like before they were drained, and it was all sort of just marshy, swampy, waterways everywhere, but there were a few areas of raised land, and as I say, this was one of those. So it was the island of Crowland, or the island of Crowland. The junction on the left up ahead, which is it Millfield Crescent, something like that. It's got the word mill in it, and that's because of this photograph taken from more or less where we are now, around about 1908. In the distance on the left you can just about see the Abbey, and in the distance on the right you can see the spire of the old school, which is where we're going to walk on to next, because that's still standing. But that's an old post mill in the foreground, and a lovely view. The mill dated back to the 1790s. It milled till the 1890s, and it was burnt down on bonfire night burnt down by some rogue kids, I think, on Guy Fawkes night, 1911. It was an old post mill, as a lot of the early 1800s mills were of this format. They could rotate the mill around on this sort of wooden base, and I say it worked for 100 years and then got burnt down, but they saved it at least on a postcard. Millfield Gardens, so it is still remembered today, and it's gone obviously. There's the spire in the distance that was in that old postcard image, just to prove we are in the right place. And that spire belongs to an old school built in 1857 that's undergone various name changes in its time. Postland Road School is probably the best one to use. It's also been referred to as the Old School and the Little School even. And for a short period of time it was part of St Guthlac School, which is next door to it and still standing today. It stopped being part of the sort of educational setup here in, well, as recent as 2007, if I recall correctly, when it was closed down, and it's now been converted into a des res. Well, it's not a des res, it's multiple des reses within the building. You can actually find this on various estate agent sites and get a good look at what is inside it. But the building still stands, thank heavens. It's a spectacular building. It was a girls' school when it opened in 1857, 200 girls capacity. Lovely building. It is now, and I quote, another exclusive development from the Brightfield Group. Next door to the old building is what is now Southview Primary School. Used to be called St Guthlac Secondary School, built in 1963. The secondary school closed in 2011 and it's now just a primary school. Nothing much to see. When it was a secondary school, I mean, it was a secondary school until 2011 and that was it, basically. As St Guthlac's secondary school education departed from Crowland and you had to go to Spalding. It's all primary now. Whenever I do these walks, I do try to do circular walks, not least because I've got to get back to the car at the end of it all, but you can't really do that with Crowland. It's a kind of, it's got a centrepiece and then you've got roads spoking out from there. You've got a North Street, South Street, West Street, East Street. There's no way of doing it apart from just going up one and back down and then up the other and back down and so on and so forth. So if I've got my map reading right, we should be coming down towards the top end of West Street for those who are interested in terms of the route that I'm taking. So we're going to go down West Street into the centre and then out along North Street. West Street. Building on the left, the sort of white one there, has got a, I don't know what you call it, quatrefoil, I think is what they call them. High up on the eaves on the side there. Believed to have come from the Abbey. I mean, how do you prove that? I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of a bit random. Randomly inserted on the side of the building. And may well have come from the Abbey. Looks like it, doesn't it? A house with the black lintels there right in the centre with the date stamped 1784 on the wall. It used to be the Ship pub. We'll find a few pubs on our trek. Former pubs, that used to be the Ship and it's called the Ship Cottage in commemoration. You get a lot of these sort of grass islands down these streets in Crowland. There must be a reason for it. places that I walk down, there are listed buildings down here, which I will mention when we bump into them. But then you find every other building looks just as old, and you kind of think, well, why isn't that listed? That one over there is listed. There's 2 cottages, late 1700s, with thatch roof. So what's that, 250 years old? Very nice. A lot of buildings you look at and think that must have been something, but I can't tell you what. That was something. That's just the whole design of it. Almost looks like 2 shops, but I don't know what it was. Someone's going to tell me. The white building to the left of the arch behind this car has got a stamp on the wall. 1811. I mean, looking at, not listed. Not in a great state either, but wonderful character for sure. Coming up to the Crown Inn on the left. I think it used to be known as the Rose and Crown, and I read somewhere it wasn't popular with the locals because it used to house primarily sort of, I think they referred to them as vagrants and visiting labourers. And I'm not quite sure what's wrong with that, but I'm told the locals back then, unlike I'm sure now, when it's very popular, I'm sure, yeah, but the locals used to avoid it. Right, coming into the heart of Crowland now, and the famous bridge, Trinity Bridge. Used to be known as Holy Trinity Bridge, built by the monks, and it was built back in 1375 and it still stands today. There ain't many bridges built that far back that are still standing, as in none whatsoever. An incredible bridge. We'll talk more about it once I get on board, but it's very much the heart of the town. The 1900s, early 1900s photograph of this scene when it used to be Schollers, drapers and grocers. Now it's the Co-op. The statue on the bridge here dates to 1260, and it was taken from the very top of the old nave on the abbey before it was brought down, and it was brought along to the bridge here. Everyone says it's Jesus Christ seated. I'm going to argue, as I will a few times with historians on this walk, I think it's King Ethelblad, the guy that was behind the building of the abbey in the first place. He's got a crown on, doesn't mean it's not Jesus. My opinion is it's King Ethelblad. Could be wrong. 1260. It's pretty old. view from the bridge. Looking down North Street, you may think to yourself, well, it's a wide road. Oh, you probably don't. I'm telling you, it's a wide road for what it is. Think Long Causeway in Peterborough. Another road that is abnormally wide for what it is. And the reason for both of them being wide is because a waterway used to run right down the middle. Hard to imagine. This may help or may not. But yeah, a waterway used to run towards us down North Street and into this bridge that we're standing on. The reason we've got such an unusual three-sided bridge, as it were, is because it used to split underneath us, and part of it went up towards the Abbey and then out towards Guy Herne and Wisbeach, and the other one headed down south towards Peterborough. Now, most historians will tell you it was the River Welland that was diverted through Crowland. I don't buy that. I think it's a waterway that came off the River Welland, but wasn't the Welland itself. And I think it came off because the monks diverted it down here. They wanted a waterway at the Abbey for their own purposes. That was common with Benedictine monastery sites. They often do carve out their own waterways, as they did at Sawtry. And I'm pretty confident that's what they did. This wasn't the Welland. This was a waterway that came off the Welland. Now take a look at this map if you think I'm going mad. This was hard to find. This is a 1500s map. And like all maps of that age, they can be a bit sketchy and a bit rough. But what is clear on this map, if you look in the top left-hand corner, excuse the noise, top left-hand corner, you'll see the River Welland continues north to Spalding as it does today, which would suggest it didn't get diverted into Crowland. What you will see here, and I'll put a ring around, a red circle around Trinity Bridge, where we are at the moment, and you can see there is a waterway that hits the bridge and then splits into two, but it ain't the Welland. And if you go by that map, it proves the point, really. It's interesting to try and work out where those two split waterways go. One of them follows, I think, Cat's Water today towards Peterborough, and the other one goes out, I forget the name of the waterway now, but it heads out towards Guy Herne. But it was before the fens were drained, so the waterways all changed once the fens got drained anyway. So whatever course it took back then, you're probably not going to find any evidence of those waterways today. But that's my thinking on this anyway, that the waterway that created this bridge was not the River Welland. It's an incredible bridge built by the monks, which I think also substantiates the point. They brought the waterway down here and they felt it was on them to build a bridge so that people could get across it. Otherwise they wouldn't have been too popular. I should also mention it's widely accepted that the waterway in some form still exists today underneath the road. It was apparently culverted and became the main sewer. But for all I know, it still is. So that would be interesting to see what is underneath the surface, if indeed it's true. Another reason for saying it's not the Welland, although the people who claim this was the Welland just say that the Welland was diverted again in the whenever, 1700s or whatever. But as I say, I don't think the Welland came down here at all. George and Angel pub, or inn as it was, built 1714. There's a date stamp on the left at the top. One of these buildings used to be the Granby Head pub. I think it's the All About Cakes one, but it could be Fridays next door. Could be both. You just can't work it out from old maps which building was the pub, indeed, if the building is still standing, but I think it is. One of those two, I would say. Lots of lovely old buildings, not listed, but very nice. That has to be an old fire station. It's not on any maps, but you can see what it is. Old firehouse, fire engine house. Can't be anything else, can it? I'm sure someone will tell me now that it is something else, but nah. Fire engine house, got to be. Lots of these grass islands in the middle of the road coming up. On an old 1887 map there were 17 buildings on this green. Now there's one. Hairdressers. There used to be a pub next door to it as well, if I can find it. It's that one. That's the Wheat Sheaf, or was the Wheat Sheaf. Yes, used to be a very busy green in terms of dwellings. I'm slightly guessing on this one. That sideways house there, I think, is an old former Methodist chapel. I know it doesn't look totally like one, apart from it's sideways on and it's tall and thin. But I think it was. It's marked on an old 1880s map, 1887. As a Free Methodist chapel, and that looks old, so I'm going to say that's what it used to be. And next door is another guess, Northern Villa it says, but it looks a bit like a pub, and there's a missing pub down here called the White Hart, and I cannot find where it was apart from it's next to this green. At the moment I'm going to guess that used to be the White Hart pub. I'm sure someone will tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like a pub. No disrespect to the owners. That looks old, but it's not listed, so I can tell you nothing about it. Interesting. I think there's another pub down here somewhere. I think it's the one with the thatch up ahead, behind this big jeep. Used to be the Old Crown Inn, dating back to the late 1700s. If I'm right, it'll probably still be called the Crown or the Old Crown something. Spot on. Spot on. The Old Crown Cottage. Another nice thatch. This is also listed. Built in 1793. Yeah, above the door. 1793. Got a date stamp of 1845 on that one. It's not a listed building though. Fire engine house again. I think that was the Granby Head, the tall one. Sticking my neck out. Still looks like a pub. Now a chippy. wading down the middle of the river towards the bridge. It's just an amazing structure, full stop. But to be as old as it is, 1375, is incredible. On to South Street. Used to be a smithy on the 1880s map somewhere over there. Or over there, who knows. I think the building on the right used to be another pub, the Carpenter's Arms. I could be wrong, but I think it was that all merged as one. It was certainly down here somewhere, and that looks right. Know nothing about this one, the White House. What on earth was that? No idea. Could that sort of pointy building on the right have been a pub? On the old 1880s map, it has a PH, public house, pretty much on that spot. But I can't tell you what it was. If it was. Could be a pub. It's a lovely row of old buildings buckling out. None of those listed, that's a surprise. Lovely row of buildings. Here's an old one. This goes back to the 1600s. Like all of these old buildings, they've been modified since, although it looks pretty, the brickwork looks pretty old. Used to be one big house, it's two now, but it used to be one big one. Presumably owned by someone important. And as I say, it dates back to the 1600s and it is listed. Lovely cute little cottage coming up, number 53. That is also a listed building, grade 2 listed, built in the mid 1700s. Very nice. Modern stone cladding, but with an 1826 date stamp on it. Just wandering down the bottom end of South Street because there's a house sitting across the end of it called Crawford House. That's the big one in the distance, which dated originally back to 1680 with plenty of modifications since. Used to belong to a John Crawford, who was a former bailiff of the Manor of Crowland. Can't really see much from this side, unfortunately, and we can't go around the back, but I will put a picture up to show the splendour of the other side of the building, where apparently there are bits and bobs in the garden and in the walls that date back to the Abbey, but I can't show you those. Strange how it just sits across the road and stops South Street in its tracks. Looks better from the other side, but that is Crawford House. I wish I could tell you more about these buildings as to what they were, but there is just a blank void in terms of that element of history. In terms of what's on the internet and in any books that I've read. Every one of these buildings will have a story. Reform Street. Let's go down Reform Street. Wasn't on my original itinerary. Yeah, Reform Street. There was a chapel down here. I'm going to put up an old picture of the chapel. No, it wasn't 1860s, 1920, get it right. 1920 photograph. You'll see it looks slightly different. Used to have a spire which had to come down because it was in a bad state. And it used to have Sunday school buildings on the left here, which is now a car park, and they were removed relatively recently. 1960s, it was a youth club as well in those buildings, but they've gone now. The chapel's still here, and it's still a chapel, I think. Methodist chapels are always great buildings, architecturally. They don't mess around. Interesting. T. Ward stonemason. Superb. Stonemason and builder. I love this row of houses as well. I did drive down here a few weeks back, and yeah, no idea of age. Might be a date stamp on one or two of them, but very cute. On the right, pretty much now, used to be Southview Primary School. Used to sit between this road and the one that runs parallel to it, which will be coming back down in a minute. Southview Primary School was built 1878, so this would have been a noisy road during school time from 1878 onwards, and the school closed 2014 and they moved to the Southview Primary School site that we saw earlier on Postland Road. Another former, well, this was a former, the other one was still a Methodist chapel. This is a former Methodist chapel. 1860, on the wall at the top there, now Crowland Community Hall and a day nursery. Let's say 1860 or 1862, one or the other, might be 1862, can't really make that out. I think it's 1862. I was looking at this building on a map last night, trying to work out whether it was an old schoolmaster's house, because it's next to the site of the old school. It looks old enough to be, it may not be. Yeah, schoolhouse. That was a genuine guess. I never saw that last night. It made sense that it would be the schoolhouse, because the school used to be behind it, which are all new builds now. And the old schools always used to have a schoolhouse like that with fantastic chimneys on it. Brilliant. Everything to your right here, Hardwick Close, and all these identical buildings sit on the site of a not too long ago disappeared school, which, as I said earlier, is Southview, was Southview Primary School. Built 1878 and closed 2014. Put a picture up of it. Very nice building as well. Sad to lose it, but can't just leave it there. And we need housing, I guess, so. But yeah, that's the site of the old Southview Primary School. Now, Albion Street used to be known as Poorhouse Lane, along with various other titles. When I saw Poorhouse Lane, I thought, workhouse, must be a workhouse down here, and there is a building in the distance that could have been a workhouse behind that orange van when we get down there, which is, I think, Albion House it's called. But then the more I read, the more I realised that no one has actually definitively stated that there was a workhouse down here, and there may not have been. Poorhouse does not relate to workhouse, it relates to the way they built the cottages down here and the fact that people had the right to own the cottages if they had the key to the cottages. It's a very strange setup. You can read all about it. I think it's called keyhole buildings, I don't know. Very weird. It was built for poorer people to be able to own their own house. And that's where the name poorhouse came from, not workhouse. There are documents that say there was a workhouse in existence in the 1700s, but I don't think it was down here. I think it was on West Street near the bridge, but who knows, not me. Behind the lorry, as I say, I think it's called Albion House, the white building. If that was a workhouse in these parts, I think that must be it. Not because it's on Poorhouse Lane, because it's actually on West Street. But the only document I can trust that actually says, there's an old newspaper report, 1770s I think it was, said that the workhouse was on West Street near the bridge, and that's what that building is. Would that be an old workhouse? I don't know. Mystery. Right, we're back at the bridge once again, and we're going to proceed down East Street. Right, take a look at this. Dates to the 1700s, and it's a mounting block. Look how worn it is. Look how worn those steps are. You would climb up that to mount on your horse or carriage, but primarily it's a horse mounting block apparently. Not sure how they know. Superb though. 1700s. Also superb is that building across the road, which is the old manor house, which I'm told is being done up slowly, and I hope so, because that is fantastic. 1690, the old Crowland manor house that has got to stay standing, needs looking after. Brilliant. Believed that there was an even older building on this site, although this one was built in 1690. It's believed there was an older manor house going back way beyond that. That's number, well, it says 8. No, it is number 8. Used to be the Eagle Tavern, another pub, former pub. War memorial, erected in 1918, in grateful memory of the men from this parish who made the supreme sacrifice in the Great War 1914 to 18. I'm sure there's a Second World War equivalent on there, which is what's at the bottom, 1939 to 1945. May they all rest in peace. Some more lovely buildings. Actually, the listed one is this sort of cream and blue one, which is listed as a shop with accommodation above, built 1832. It's cute, I suppose. Got an old photograph here from more or less this spot. Used to be a bakery on the left, which is now a library. That's the Abbey Hotel, as you can see. Used to be the George Hotel. Very nice. Thatch at the end of this road is listed as a late 1600s cottage, and in brackets they've put possibly earlier than late 1600s. Is seriously old, and it looks seriously old. Yeah, that's an old one. St Guthlac's cottage. Why not? I'm sure he would have loved to live there. Not. Crowland Abbey, or as they like to be known, Crowland Abbey. We'll have a wander round in due course. I'm going to try and do a potted history of the Abbey, particularly in its first sort of 400 or 500 years, which is quite an amazing history really. It makes you wonder how on earth it survived this long. I mentioned at the start of the video, it all really comes down to young Guthlac, who came here to live the life of a hermit, which never quite happened because his reputation as being a wise, spiritual guy drew people in, and one of the people it drew in was the soon-to-be King Ethelblad of Mercia, the biggest of the Anglo-Saxon regions, which sort of covered the whole of the Midlands of England. And Guthlac promised him he'd be king, and he was king, and as Ethelblad promised, he would come back if he did become king and build an abbey as a thank you to Guthlac. When he did come back, Guthlac had died, but he held good on his promise, and he started with a modest abbey building, which would have been wooden, with a thatched roof and not particularly robust, and that would have been around about 716, I think it was. Lasted 150 odd years, and then our Danish friends, in inverted commas, the Vikings, rampaged through the lands as they did and trashed it, and it was easy to trash. No doubt they probably burnt it down, gave it a good kicking, killed anybody that was nearby, and that was the end of it. But it was rebuilt. You know, people came back that survived the Viking attack, new spiritual people, whatever. They were determined that Guthlac should have something here to remember him by, and they rebuilt it. And that was around about 950, and it was around about that time that it became a Benedictine ruled building, and the Benedictine characters like to have a much bigger estate, if you like, than just a church. So they built up all the support buildings that you would get around an abbey of this nature, so it became a much bigger estate at that point in time. But 1091, another fire did untold damage, and it was only really after that, in the sort of Norman era, around about 1109, 1110, you started to get the stone built version that we're familiar with today, and it became a far more robust building. But wait for it, 1143, another fire did some serious damage, so that set them back. Started recovering from that one, and in 1170 there was another fire, and there is details on the Abbey's own website as to why it had so many fires. There were all sorts of reasons, and some of them as simple as builders that were building on it left their fire burning overnight, and it was as simple as that sort of thing you would get nowadays really. But it was forever being rebuilt, burnt down, rebuilt and burnt down. It was about 1170 through to, well, 1170 onwards really. For a good couple of hundred years it really did grow into what became a robust stone abbey, and all the buildings around it became robust and solid and good to go really. I've got a diagram I'm going to put up. I won't call it a photo, it's an illustration obviously, that dates to around about the early 1500s, I would guess, as to what this site would have looked like. If I put it up I'll show you first of all what you would recognise today from where we are now, more or less. Those are the buildings that still survive today. Obviously they were not ruins back there, but you can probably recognise the building on this illustration in comparison with what's in front of us today. And if I bring in all the rest now, you can see just how big the site was back then, leading into the 1500s. Huge numbers of buildings, because Benedictines were very sort of, we do it all ourselves. So they needed dormitories, they needed places to make food, grow food, they needed social buildings. It wasn't just going to be a church or a monastery, it was going to be everything they needed in order to live here and not have to venture off the site. So it's very similar to Sawtry. If you watch the Sawtry video we did a year or two ago, exactly the same. A lot of infrastructure based around the abbey. But it all went wrong again. Mid 1500s, Henry VIII, disillusion of the monasteries. Basically he trashed the whole lot. The only bit that he left was what you see before you today, really, which is what has become the parish church, which was really just the northern aisle, the main part of the original abbey, which is the bit that is now in ruins. That was the centre part of the abbey, and the right hand side there used to be a south aisle which has gone now. So yeah, he did severe damage. It wasn't really repaired. 1643 was the English Civil War. The Royalists, yeah, it was the Royalists, took over the ruined part of the abbey and set it up as a sort of defensive fortress, which didn't put off young Mr. Cromwell, who came nearby and absolutely blew the hell out of it. And it was shortly after that that the nave roof collapsed, and the south side of that nave was pulled down to sort of reinforce what was surviving, which is the parish church part today. So it's been through a heck of a lot of turmoil, and I've done a ridiculously truncated history there. As I say, you can read a lot more about it than what I've just gone through, but it really did go through some really tough times to get to where it is today, where it functions as a parish church. But the parish church is really the northern aisle. It's been modified, so it's a bit more than just a basic church, but it really was just the northern aisle of the church and the actual of the abbey, sorry, but the main part of the abbey, the nave, the centrepiece, the grand part of the abbey is the bit that's now in ruins. So we're going to have a wander around and get a closer look at some of this, because it's worth seeing. Right, let's go and have a look. This would have been the main doors of the abbey. This is the centrepiece of the abbey. This is where the nave is. This is where all the people would gather. It was the heart of the abbey before it got trashed, burnt, demolished and whatever. But what a fantastic frontage this is. I'm not going to go through the detail of all these sculptures and whatever. Those four sections up above are all related to Guthlac. The one at the bottom is him arriving in Crowland in a boat, where it all started. But they're just incredible sculptures all the way up. If you remember that character sitting on Trinity Bridge that I said I thought was Ethelblad, others say is a statue of the seated Jesus Christ. It came off the top of this. This used to have a pointy bit at the top, which was removed, and that's where it came from. So yeah, this was the nave. This was the heart of the abbey, and on the left where you've got the pillars, you would have been able to walk through into the nave on the left, which is today's parish church. And through these pillars and arches on the right, you would have walked through into the south aisle, which is long gone. It would have been on that mounded section there. And when they pulled down the south aisle on our right, and part of it obviously was knocked down as well, but when they removed all the stonework on the right, they used it to fill in the gaps between the pillars on this side, and that allowed them to then create, as it were, a self-contained building which became the parish church. Henry VIII, with his dissolution of the monasteries, wanted to rip down everything that had any sort of relation to supporting the Pope and the Church. He wanted his Church of England to be the new religion, but he wouldn't knock down anything that was related to a parish church or which allowed villagers to use as a parish church, because he didn't want to alienate the people too much. So he knocked down all the monastic stuff, all the serious stuff, all the support buildings, but he wouldn't touch anything that was related to the parish church or which could become the parish church. These windows were added because these fillings that were put in between the pillars had no windows originally, but they put them in over more recent centuries to give yourself a bit of light in what is now the parish church. You never did these, so these as they were when they filled it in, really. Now what we're looking at here with this arch at the top, which I'll talk about in more detail in a moment, this would have been the big tower, the original tower, because the current tower was added quite late on after it had become a parish church, but the original big grand central tower that appeared in that illustration, we would be looking at the wall of that now, and this huge arch would have been your entry into that huge tower. And it's Norman. It is very Norman indeed. In fact, it's about the only real genuine Norman piece of architecture still going, but that arch at the top. I'll zoom in a wee bit and a wee bit more. Classic Norman, smooth arch, sort of dog-tooth decoration. It's just classic Norman architecture, still standing. I'm not sure what the story behind this sort of altar is, apart from it's not old, and there wouldn't have been an altar here, but yeah, I don't know, it's been put there for some sort of ceremonies that they have. I don't really know. It doesn't seem to fit with the surroundings, to be honest with you. I noticed when I was down here doing a wedding a couple of weeks ago, these stones, which are gravestones, thinking, who are they? How did they get here? I'm told, or I've read up, that there were gravestones in here after it ended its life as a nave. There were gravestones in the area, and when they did some work to sort of lower the ground level here to what it used to be, they moved the gravestones to stage front, as it were. It's not a bad place. I don't know what happened to the graves, I don't know what happened to the bodies. Maybe they're still under here, no idea. Right, pre-dissolution of the monastery stage, so early part of the 1500s, we'd be now walking through the big tower and coming out the other side to what was known as the choir, which I assume is what this post is about. And the choir, it's like a chancel, as they call it. I'm not an expert on church parts, but the bit where the choir literally would be, the singing choir that is, and the altar, which you have in all churches nowadays, that little bit at the end that you're not allowed to go in unless you're bride and groom or vicar or church person. We'd be walking through that now towards the end of the abbey, which would be just a little bit behind this tree. hard to get your head around how big this was originally. You know, you're barely looking at half of what the abbey was back in the day. I was also looking at this, I can't prove anything, but I was looking at this when I was doing my wedding and wondering if some of these marks on the wall, given this took a pounding in the Civil War, are they musket ball damage? Could well be. What else could they be? Because the Royalists held out in here, and Cromwell and his boys, as I say, gave it a good kicking with everything they could throw at it. I'm pretty sure that must be damage from the Civil War, but I may be totally wrong. Looks like a scrap heap for old monastic stone. Good heavens, wonder that doesn't go walkabout. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the tower of the abbey was where that Norman arch was, and as we saw in that illustrated vision of what it might have all looked like, this tower, which is now the centrepiece of the parish church, was added much later. I can't recall the date, so I'm not going to guess, but I will put it up on the screen as to when this was put up. Well, it wasn't the original tower of the abbey. Another Guthlac monument. That's quite recently created, is that? Guthlac. Always see that one when I come and do weddings. 1680. A lot of these are grade 2 listed, and rightly so. These will be medieval as well, which doesn't say a lot. It's like 500 up to 1500, so old coffins. This one always fascinates me. In fact, I'm going to try and find this guy, because that is one hell of a block of stone. Looks like granite. And Thomas Atkinson, Postland, born January the 26th, 1880, died May the 21st, 1904, and his wife Albina died 1917. Let's try and find this guy and his wife. That's a hell of a statement piece. Very difficult to pick a grave out to look into, because most of them you cannot read. I'll make an effort to pick a couple of graves out. What about this chappie? Richard Day. Oh, what's that say? 1895. Died 1895. We'll have a look. Kind of intrigued by this one. I saw it when I came down a couple of weeks ago to do my wedding. I don't know whether there's any relevance to the fact it's got an anchor on one side of it. I don't really understand the bit at the top. There's another grave very similar to this one. Did it used to be a cross? I'm not sure it did. We might get a clue if we find out who this guy was. John Whitshead. Died June 1846. No, born 1846. Died, I think it says 1887. If that's true, he didn't live for long, but we'll find him. And his wife, I think, Annie Eliza. Yeah, it'd be interesting. It's an interesting gravestone or memorial. I'll see if there's any significance to some of the decor on it. Right, back through the nave. I guess we ought to pop in and have a look if we can. Inside, I'm not going to hang around too long. I see it enough when I do weddings. That's a fantastic building, this. If you imagine, it used to have a significant roof on it, not dissimilar to what's in the parish church now. It went up quite a bit higher. It would have been extremely grand to be walking through here. There's so much graffiti as builders' marks, really. RK seems to be prominent. If you stand in between the choir pews facing the altar and look directly above you to the roof boss, you can see the image of the Green Man. The Green Man is a pagan symbol of fertility, usually a face surrounded by leaves. Let's have a look. There he is. Heading back down East Street now towards the bridge. I think I missed this building out on the way down. It's got a lovely date stamp on it, 1775. It's called the Manse now. I'll have to look that up. And the Manse, or Manse, means a house for church minister. Doesn't tell me too much. Nice building. Nice date stamp on it, 1775. Amazing structure. Look at the brickwork on the side of that, up near the eaves. Amazing. I think that's not a listed property. That's got some age on it. That is it. That is Crowland for you. I hope you enjoyed some of that at least. Apologies if I got some of it wrong. There's a lot of stuff in there that I just don't know too much about. But please, as I said at the beginning, if you're from Crowland, once lived in Crowland, and you know some of the stuff we're looking at and I didn't mention, or I mentioned it and got it wrong, please add your comments at the bottom of the video. Peterborough Images or YouTube, it doesn't matter which. Just add your comments at the bottom and that'll help other people. They can read up on the things I didn't cover, and I'd be very grateful to you. So many thanks for tuning in. I no doubt will be out again sometime, although I've got nothing planned at the moment and I really need it to cool down a bit because it's mighty warm. Not sure I can do this. But as I say, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will hopefully see you again next time.